So for the setup of the brain MRI and MRA, we will be prepping the room in advance prior to the patient arriving. Once the patient arrives, then we will go ahead and proceed with the screening process, which includes going over the screening form and changing out of street clothes and making sure that all personal belongings are locked up, such as any ferrous object or like phone, keys, wallet, and etc. We will also be following the AIDIT, so acknowledge, introduce, explain the duration, examination, and then just to thank them for being with us. But yeah, and the coil that we use in the brain is going to be the 8-channel HD brain coil or the birdcage coil. As far as localizing goes, we will be using the or mapping it with the glabella, so like right in between the eyebrows, and that's where we will set the laser landmark. And the angulation and coverage for our brain sequences. So for the axial, we will basically be using the sagittal image to help map the our images. So for axial, using the sagittal image, we will angle it between the genu and splenium of the corpus callosum. And then it'll be covering the top of the brain down to the foramen magnum. For coronal, we will be using the sagittal image as well, and we will be aligning it parallel to the brain stem. We will be covering anterior to posterior of the brain and making sure that we keep all of the brain tissue in the image and that we don't cut it out. Lastly, the sagittal sequence. We will be angling it between both hemispheres of the brain on the coronal and axial images. We will be covering it from the left to the right of the brain, and we will try not to clip either of the temporal lobes. See. Okay, so describe the angulation and coverage for the axial 3D multi-slab acquisition for the MRA of the cow. So for this, we will be positioning the patient same. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Same as the brain MRI, so it'll be the patient head first supine position. We will be angling it using the genu and the splenium of the corpus callosum as well. And it'll be covering the same parts, so it'll be covering the corpus callosum to the foramen magnum. However, anything above or below, we will be using a sat band to remove the parts that we don't want in the image for this MRA image. This MRA for the cow doesn't require contrast. One second. Loki, one kitchen. Okay. Sorry, I'm 4 minutes in. I don't want to start over. Okay. So it will be done without contrast. Okay. Okay, what kind of post-processing is done on the MRA cow? So for this, the MRA cow is displayed as the maximum intensity projection, so the MIP, and it uses the ray trace algorithm, which means it's accentuating the bright signal and will allow us to display it as a 3D image. Us as techs, we will be using the MIPing, thing which is essentially we're using like a scalpel that will remove any of the external vessels around the cow, and that way we can just isolate the cow itself. Okay, and now we will be going over the neck setup for the MRA of the neck. So it's essentially the same setup. We want to prep prior to the patient coming in. Once they do come in, we want to go through the screening process, which will include going over the screening form, allowing them to change out of their street clothes, and giving them the opportunity to put things away in the locker, so phones, keys, wallets, cards, jewelry, etc. This would be the time to use the bathroom if necessary, and yeah. Okay, so what coil is used and how is the patient positioned? So the coil used for the neck MRA is the HD neurovascular array, and the landmark for this will be mid-neck, and it'll be about 1 to 2 inches below the chin. Patient is positioned head first and supine position. Okay. And describe your understanding of the sequences used for an MRI neck and how are they run. So the sequences for the MRA neck, okay, they do require contrast. Let's see. Okay, so it is run with contrast. I think it might just be for coronal. Okay, so for the coronal image, the field of view will include the frontal sinus right below the aortic arch. So I believe we didn't want to use the spine coil. Okay, yeah. But so we'll be using the HDNV array head coil, and for the coronal, it'll include the frontal sinus down to the aortic arch. So we will have 2 sequences, I believe. So one will be pre-contrast, and then the patient will then be receiving contrast on the neck scan, which we will let them know. It uses a fluoro triggering method to watch, so that we're able to watch the contrast being injected, and once it enters the carotids is when we will start the sequence. And yeah, so once we see it moving up the neck, we will start the sequence. Okay, so for the sagittal, I probably should have started with this first. So we scan the sagittal first because this is what we will use to map the other sequences, so axial and coronal. But this is going to be angled parallel to the spinal column. The field of view will be the frontal sinus down to the aortic arch, and then we have to make sure that it covers from ear to ear. And the axial sequence, it will be angled with the C-spine or straight axially, and the field of view will include all of the neck vasculature, and it'll cover from the skull base down to just underneath the aortic arch. Okay, and I believe I have covered everything. Thank you, and sorry about my dogs.